A freezing December day in 1890 turned the plains of South Dakota into a killing field. The Wounded Knee Massacre, wrongly called a battle, marks the deadliest mass shooting in American history. Nearly 300 Lakota Sioux, half of them women and children, fell to U.S. Army bullets in a brutal act of violence. Historian Jeffrey Ostler, writing in 2004, said it was no random clash. Every step, from disarming the Lakota to burying their bodies, followed a cold logic of racial domination. This was no fight. It was a slaughter. What sparked this tragedy? How did the army cover it up? What's the truth they tried to bury? This is a story you need to hear. Stick with me. For decades, the U.S. government stole Native American lands, targeting the Lakota Sioux above all. In 1874, gold fever hit. Prospectors found riches in South Dakota's Black Hills, a sacred place promised to the Sioux by the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868. That deal barred settlers and miners, but the government broke its word. By 1876, the Black Hills swarmed with prospectors, and the Lakota's trust was crushed. Then came a deeper blow. The bison herds, the lifeblood of the Plains tribes, vanished. From tens of millions, they dropped to under 1,000 by the 1880s. White hunters, backed by government plans, killed them off to starve the tribes into submission. The Lakota relied on bison for food, clothing, survival. Without them, they were forced onto reservations like Pine Ridge and Standing Rock. Corrupt Indian agents hoarded supplies, leaving the Lakota hungry and angry by 1890. Their betrayal set the stage for tragedy. Ready to learn what happened next? In the bitter winter of 1890, the Lakota Sioux were clinging to a flicker of hope. Starving, stripped of their lands and confined to reservations, they turned to a spiritual lifeline called the ghost dance. A Paiute prophet named Wovoka sparked it with a vision. The Christian Messiah, reborn as a Native American, would sweep away white settlers, bring back the bison herds, and reunite families with their lost ancestors. To the Lakota, this wasn't just a dance. It was a prayer for a lost world. Can you feel their desperation? The ghost dance grew from their suffering. The U.S. government had broken every promise. The sacred Black Hills, guaranteed by the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868, was swarming with gold seekers by the 1870s. The bison, once 30 million strong, dwindled to about 1,000 by 1889, slaughtered by white hunters to starve the Plains tribes into submission. Without bison, the Lakota faced hunger on reservations like Pine Ridge and Standing Rock. Corrupt Indian agents piled on the misery, hoarding food or selling it at prices the Lakota couldn't pay. Some let families starve to crush their spirit. In this darkness, the ghost dance shone bright. Lakota dancers moved slowly, silently, to a single drumbeat, believing their steps could make Wovoka's prophecy real. They wore ghost dance shirts, inspired by a vision from the holy man Black Elk. Two Lakota leaders, Kicking Bear and Short Bull, spread a bold claim. These shirts could stop bullets. It was a misreading of Wovoka's message, but it gave the Lakota strength. To them, the dance was hope. To white settlers, it was a threat. They whispered of a Messiah war, fearing a Sioux rebellion. The government rattled, banned the dance at Pine Ridge. The Lakota danced on, their faith unbroken. Fear drove the government to act. They thought about sending Buffalo Bill Cody, a showman trusted by Lakota chiefs, to ease tensions. But Cody was halfway across Europe with his Wild West show. As winter tightened its grip, the Lakota starved, barred from hunting. At Standing Rock, Indian agent James McLaughlin felt the pressure. Outnumbered by the Lakota, he decided to arrest their leader, Sitting Bull, to snuff out the ghost dance. Sitting Bull didn't fully trust the ghost dance. He questioned its miracles, but let his people dance, knowing their despair. On the 15th of December, 1890, McLaughlin sent Indian police to his cabin. As Sitting Bull agreed to go, a crowd of ghost dancers gathered outside. Tensions snapped. A dancer shot Lieutenant Henry Bullhead, the officer in charge. Bullhead fired back, aiming for the shooter, but striking Sitting Bull. Another policeman, Red Tomahawk, ended it with a bullet to Sitting Bull's head. 6 police and 7 Lakota fell in the chaos. The news hit like a spark in dry grass. Over 200 of Sitting Bull's Hunkpapa followers fled Standing Rock, seeking refuge with Chief Spotted Elk, known as Bigfoot, and his Miniconjou band at Cheyenne River. Their desperate flight pushed the Lakota closer to a breaking point. After Sitting Bull's death, fear gripped the Lakota. Chief Spotted Elk, known as Bigfoot, led his Miniconjou band and 38 Hunkpapa followers away from Cheyenne River on the 23rd of December, 1890. They headed for Pine Ridge, hoping Red Cloud's influence could shield them. The U.S. government saw rebellion brewing. Orders went out to the army: round up the Sioux, disarm them, and crush any hint of independence. Every Lakota chief was a target, including Spotted Elk. Spotted Elk didn't know he was wanted. Old, weak, and battling pneumonia, he wanted peace, not war. His group raised a white flag as they camped near Pine Ridge. On the 28th of December, 1890, Major Samuel Whiteside and a detachment of the 7th Cavalry met them near Porcupine Butte. John Shangrau, a half-Lakota scout, warned Whiteside against disarming the Lakota too quickly. It could spark violence. Whiteside listened, for now, and escorted the group 5 miles to Wounded Knee Creek. The next morning, the 29th of December, Colonel James Forsyth arrived with more troops, swelling their numbers to 500. They surrounded the Lakota camp, where 230 men and 120 women and children huddled. 4 Hotchkiss M1875 guns, deadly rapid-fire cannons, loomed over the scene. Forsyth's orders were clear: take every weapon and move the Lakota to trains for relocation. The soldiers searched, seizing 38 rifles. No elders or women carried arms, but tension crackled like dry wood. A Lakota medicine man, Yellowbird, stirred the young men. He chanted, danced the ghost dance, and proclaimed their sacred shirts could stop bullets. The air grew heavy. A deaf Lakota named Black Coyote, unable to speak English, clutched his rifle. He'd paid dearly for it and didn't understand the soldiers' commands. An Indian scout shouted, "He's deaf! He can't hear you!" But 2 soldiers grabbed Black Coyote from behind. In the struggle, his rifle fired a single shot. The spark lit a firestorm. Yellowbird tossed dust into the air, a signal of defiance. 5 young Lakota men threw off their blankets, revealing hidden rifles, and fired at the 7th Cavalry's Troop K. The soldiers, already on edge, unleashed a torrent of gunfire. Most Lakota had no weapons, but the bullets didn't discriminate. Black Coyote fell. Spotted Elk, frail and unarmed, was among the first cut down, his body left in the snow. The Hotchkiss guns roared, spraying shells into the camp where women and children hid. Some soldiers fell, likely hit by their own side's fire. Chaos swallowed the camp. Women and children fled to a nearby ravine, scrambling for cover. But the soldiers, their discipline shattered, gave chase on horseback. They hunted survivors across miles, shooting without mercy. Others walked the field, finishing off the wounded. In less than an hour, the slaughter was over. Estimates vary, but at least 150 Lakota lay dead, possibly as many as 300, most of them women and children. 50 more were wounded. The army lost 25 men, with 39 wounded, 6 later dying. A blizzard swept in, burying the carnage in snow. It stalled any search for survivors. Soldiers loaded 51 survivors, 4 men and 47 women and children, onto wagons bound for Pine Ridge. When the storm cleared on the 1st of January, 1891, they returned to dig a mass grave, piling in the frozen bodies. Local civilians hired to help worked alongside them. Some Lakota families had already taken their dead. Amid the horror, a miracle. 4 infants, wrapped in their mothers' shawls, were found alive, clinging to life in the snow. The Wounded Knee Massacre left a grim toll. On that frozen field, 84 Lakota men, 44 women, and 18 children lay dead, with at least 7 others clinging to life, their wounds too deep to heal. In the aftermath, some soldiers turned scavengers, stripping ghost dance shirts from the fallen. These sacred garments, symbols of Lakota hope, were later sold as grim trophies, a cruel twist to the tragedy. Can you imagine the heartbreak of a people already broken? General Nelson A. Miles, the Army's top commander, laid bare the horror in his report. A deaf Lakota named Black Coyote, caught in a struggle over his rifle, sparked the chaos when his gun fired. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. Soldiers gunned down warriors, the sick, chief spotted elk, and countless women and children fleeing across the prairie. The Army's own investigation backed this up. Witnesses said soldiers grabbed Black Coyote from behind, triggering the fatal shot. He had no intent to fight. One survivor, a warrior named Wazumaza, later known as Dewey Beard, spoke with quiet clarity. Black Coyote was ready to lay down his rifle, he said. He wasn't aiming at anyone. They spun him around, grabbed his gun, and it went off. The sound was deafening, a spark that ignited the massacre. A soldier, Trooper Theodore Ragnar, confirmed Black Coyote's death. But another Lakota, Turning Hawk, saw him differently, calling him a reckless nobody whose actions lit the fuse. Some historians point to a darker motive. The 7th Cavalry, still stinging from their defeat at Little Bighorn in 1876, where George Custer fell, may have sought revenge. No hard proof backs this. But the question lingers. The Army knew the massacre would spark outrage. Bad press loomed, so they scrambled to control the story. Colonel James W. Forsyth, the man in charge, faced the heat. General Miles, sickened by the killing of unarmed Lakota, especially women and children, stripped Forsyth of his command. But Forsyth fought back, rewriting his report to paint his troops as heroes battling fanatic rebels. A court of inquiry, called by Miles, criticized Forsyth's sloppy tactics but let him off the hook. Shockingly, he was later reinstated, climbing to Major General, despite Miles branding him a murderer. The government's response was even more galling. Based on Forsyth's polished report, 19 soldiers received the Medal of Honor for their actions at Wounded Knee, with 31 more honored for the broader campaign. These awards, meant for valor, became a bitter insult to the Lakota, whose pleas for justice went unheard. Valentine T. McGillicuddy, a former Pine Ridge agent, saw the deeper truth. In a letter dated the 15th of January, 1891, to General Leonard Wright Colby, he wrote that the ghost dance was no threat. It was a symptom of years of betrayal and hunger. Forcing the Lakota to disarm, he warned, was like treating a fever while ignoring the disease. Armed Sioux, he argued, were easier to manage than desperate, disarmed ones driven to rebellion. The wounds of Wounded Knee never fully healed. The site, now a National Historic Landmark, stands as a solemn reminder. In 1990, a century later, Congress passed a resolution expressing deep regret for the massacre, a belated nod to justice. But not everyone cared. Frank Baum, editor of the Aberdeen Saturday Pioneer and later author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, penned a chilling editorial on the 3rd of January, 1891. He called for wiping out the Indians, labeling them untamed creatures who threaten civilization. His words, dripping with hate, echoed the era's darkest beliefs, a stark contrast to the Lakota's fight for survival. The Wounded Knee Massacre didn't just end lives. It crushed the ghost dance, a spiritual lifeline for the Lakota, and marked one of the final clashes in the Indian Wars. Among the scars left behind, one sacred relic stood out. A ghost dance shirt, pierced by bullets and stained with blood. In 1891, this haunting piece of history crossed the ocean to Glasgow, Scotland, carried by Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show. A year later, in 1892, performer George C. Krager donated it to the Kelvin Grove Museum, where it hung on display for over a century, a silent witness to tragedy. Can you feel the weight of its story? For the Lakota, that shirt was no museum piece. It was a symbol of their faith, their loss, and their unbroken spirit. By 1998, their call to bring it home grew loud. Marcella LeBeau, a Lakota nurse and great-granddaughter of Joseph Horncloud, a Wounded Knee survivor, led the charge. She traveled to Glasgow, meeting with the City Council and Scottish First Secretary Donald Dewar. I was there, a graduate student in Glasgow, invited to join their discussions. Dewar turned to me and asked, "Colin, what do you think about returning the shirt?" I answered, "If another nation held the tunic of Scotland's Robert the Bruce, wouldn't you want it back?" He nodded, smiled, and said, "I understand." Marcella spoke with quiet power, explaining the shirt's deep meaning to her people. It wasn't just fabric. It was a step toward healing a wound that had festered since 1890. She offered a handmade replica to the museum, a gesture of goodwill. The council agreed to return the original, but only if Glasgow's people had a say. They put it to a public vote. Having lived in Glasgow for years, I was moved by the response. The city's residents, touched by the Lakota's plea, voted overwhelmingly to send the shirt home. In 1999, after sacred repatriation ceremonies, the Ghost Dance shirt returned to South Dakota, where it found a place in the Museum of the South Dakota State Historical Society. Marcella LeBeau called it a moment of closure, a chance for her people to begin healing. In 2009, the Lakota gathered at Eagle Butte to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the shirt's return, honoring its journey. By 2018, Marcella, then in her late 90s, shared a new hope: to see the shirt move to the cultural center of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe at Eagle Butte, closer to her people's heart. That shirt, once a symbol of pain, now stands as a beacon of resilience and reconciliation.